Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'd like to pass along a few tips about flying your Mavic Mini in colder weather. Now, we had our first snowfall a couple of days back in New Jersey, and it got me thinking about all the new flyers that just had a Mavic Mini arrive in the mail, or maybe in a couple of weeks, you'll come downstairs, look under the tree, there'll be a box there, and you'll pop open the box, and out will come a brand new Mavic Mini. Trust me when I tell you, you will turn into a 7-year-old at Christmas time. You're going to want to charge it up, get outside, and put it up in the air as quickly as possible. So I wanted to put a clip together to explain that flying in the winter is a little different than flying in the summer because the electronics that are involved with putting a quad up and controlling that quad at a distance are really sensitive. And there's a lot of stuff going on here. You've got a digital compass, an IMU, you've got rotors, you've got speed controllers, you've got transmission technologies back and forth. All of that circuitry hates cold weather. So it's going to misbehave, it's going to get wonky on you. And I want to give you a couple of tips to make sure that you can fly safely and just have fun out there in the wintertime when you're flying, because one of my favorite times to fly is after a fresh snowfall. If I can get out there in the morning or the afternoon during golden hour, there's nothing more beautiful than that fresh powder from 200 feet up with the sun washing across that landscape, especially if I can catch a deer or some other animal out there running across that fresh powder. It's just an incredibly cool experience. So I want you to fly all winter, but just be smart about it because scary things can happen if you're not careful. So let's get into it. First thing I'll talk about is protecting the equipment. So if you're going out in the wintertime, even if it's just cold and there's no snow on the ground, you have to have some kind of case to protect your equipment. So I'm not saying you have to get a hard case. If you bought the Flymore combination, you're okay with the case that they sent you, but having a case that's water resistant is really important because if there's snow on the ground, you're gonna have to put the case down someplace. And if you put it down in the snow and snow gets in there and it gets wet and inside the gear, you're gonna get everything wet. So have a case that you can take out in the field with you that's gonna protect your quad. The other thing is when you're out in the wintertime, snow can come out of nowhere, right? There can be ice crystals in the air, there can be drizzle. So having a case to protect it's number one. Number two, you have to have something to put it down on. Now, I love landing mats. I use them every time I fly for a bunch of different reasons. And I know this is kind of a controversial thing. There's a lot of people that love to hand launch and hand catch, and that's great. If you're good at that and you want to do that, that's fine. But having a landing mat with you gives you a safe place to lay things down on in the snow. So if you're trekking out into a field and it's knee-deep snow, throwing a landing mat down not only gives me a place to take off and land where I don't have to worry about the snow, but it also gives me a place to put down my case and my controller and my batteries between flights, right? So if I need to put it down someplace, I've got a nice dry place to put it. And again, I don't care if you buy an official mat like this. You could have a piece of cardboard or you could take a floor mat out of your car. Just have something with you you can lay down on top of that powder to protect your gear. That's super important. The next thing I want to talk about is when you're flying in that weather, it can be dramatically different. So the weather at ground level can vary tremendously from weather at 300 feet in the air. And what I mean by that is not only will the temperature change, but there can be wind changes as well. So you may have a very calm day down here at the earth, but up there 200 feet above you, that wind could be whipping around. So anytime I fly in the cold, the first thing I'll do is put the quad up off the ground, maybe 5 or 6 feet, just gauge the wind, gauge the control of it, because again, in the wintertime, air is denser, right? So it's kind of an advantage and a disadvantage. It's an advantage because the drone can climb easier because it's got more dense air to slice through as it's going up. It has to work harder too though, so when it's flying through the air, it's got to push through that denser air. But anyway, getting up to height, I'll bring it up to 75 feet, 100 feet. And when I get up to 100 feet, I don't usually fly more than 100 to 200 feet in most cases, but I'll get up there and gauge the wind. Am I getting wind warnings? Am I worried about that? Is there moisture up there? Can I see clouds around me that it may have ice crystals in it? So all that stuff is really important to keep an eye on. Something you don't have to worry about in the summertime unless there's a storm rolling in. But in the winter, the weather can be kind of wonky, so be careful about that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the dangers of flying in the winter. So the quad itself is going to get warm. The motors are going to get warm. The internal electronics when they're operating are going to get warm. And you're flying this through cold air. Now that's not normally a problem because cold air it's designed to take air in through these front ports and exit it through the back. I should probably open this up. But it's designed to have air pass through this unit. So there's going to be air on the bottom rolling through to cool that off behind the camera and also through here across the top of the printed circuit board. So it's designed to let air in it. Cold air going through it's not a big deal, but really cold air going through it cools that electronics down even further. And when electronics gets cold, it really starts to act a little bit funny. So too cold for electronics, below freezing, well below freezing, can cause some issues. Not that it won't operate, but it'll operate a little bit differently. So always keep an eye on your telemetry information to make sure you see the height and you know roughly where it is. If it's up to 100 feet and it says it's only up at 30 feet, probably getting cold up there, bring it down and maybe fly another day. The other thing is, when you bring it in the house, you have to be really careful with the electronics because when you're outside, it's going to get cold. The body of the product's going to get cold. And when you bring it back into the house, there's a chance, pretty good chance, that condensation is going to take place. Now, I know in the wintertime, most homes are pretty dry, but if you've got a humidifier or you've got some mechanism to make that house a little bit warmer and a little bit wetter, because that's more comfortable for you, when you bring a cold drone inside, you're going to get condensation. And the danger there is if you power it up with condensation, even a small amount of that on the electronics, water's a conductor and it's going to cause a short circuit and you could cause damage inside the unit. So my recommendation is if you're flying for a long time outside, bring it in the house, pull the battery of it, bring it in the house, let it sit there for an hour or two, let it dry off. Don't start charging the batteries. Don't try and power it up in the house and fly around. Just be smart about it. Bring it inside, let it sort of dry out on its own where the condensation won't form and you'll be in good shape. Now, one tip I'll give you that if you do land your drone in the snow. Let's say, for example, something wonky's going on with the drone and you got to put it down. You don't want it to crash. You want to bring it down naturally, but you can't get it back to where you took off where there's a landing mat, and you've got to put it down in powder. Try and find some kind of road or something you can land on, because a lot of times if you're out in the field, there's a road nearby, bring it over to the road and land there. It's still snow, but it's compact snow. It's not going to get inside the electronics. But worst case scenario, if you put this thing down in fresh powder, turn it off immediately, pull the battery out of it, hand dry it. I always carry a towel with me in the wintertime to hand dry the unit. But when you get home, you'll need to make sure the drone is totally dry, and a couple of ways to do that. Now, one way that's really inexpensive to do is to use uncooked rice. So if you've got a large bag, like I've got a gallon bag here, fill this thing up with rice, throw the drone in, seal it up, and let it sit for a day or two. That rice will it'll pull all that water out of the unit. If you want to do it quicker, it's a nice little trick here. These are desiccant packs. You get these pretty much with most of the stuff that's shipped to you, and there's always a label on the outside where they call it silica gel, do not eat. And it sounds like it's deadly. It's not really deadly. What's inside this, it isn't really a gel. If you can hear it shaking, it's actually crystals. And the crystals are silicon dioxide, but they're microscopically at the nano level. Basically, it's basically a crystal with hundreds and hundreds of holes inside of it. And what it does is it'll absorb 10 times the amount of water of its weight. So if you have a bunch of these, you always get these. I always hang on to them. I'll throw them in a bag and hang on to them. But these are incredibly good at drawing water out of electronics. So if you've gotten this wet, maybe you've flown and it started snowing, or you've dumped it in heavy snow, put it inside of a bag, throw as many of these in as you can, and let it sit for a couple of days. This will work a lot faster than the actual uncooked rice will work for you. All right, so that's that. Another thing when you're outside, we'll talk about the batteries next. Batteries behave really weirdly in cold weather because the chemical reaction that takes place inside these batteries really is supposed to be done at room temperature. When you get colder, all kinds of weird things happen with this. And the two things you're going to notice with the batteries are, number one, you're not going to get as long a flight time out of it, but more importantly, the batteries, as they get colder, are going to start, we'll call it rundown. They're going to start decreasing in their charge a lot faster, and it won't be linear, because normally batteries will go from 90% to 80% to 70%, and you can watch that, and it's tracking against time. So it's a normal slope of decay, if you will, of the battery. In the wintertime, you can be flying, it gets really cold, and the batteries can go from 80% to 70%, to 30%, and then you're panicking to get back. So I would say in the wintertime, keep your flight short, keep the drone close, and keep an eye on those batteries. Now, one thing you can do to help with that is to keep the batteries as warm as possible for as long as possible. Now, one of the tricks I use is I'll take a fishing vest or maybe a down vest and I'll wear it inside my coat, but I get one with a lot of pockets in it. And the reason for that is I'll put the batteries on the inside pockets of the jacket near my body, and my body warmth will actually keep those batteries at a moderate temperature before I put them in the drone and put them up in the air. Another trick you can do is there are companies that make pocket warmers. Now, you can use the old style where you put the lighter fluid in it and use that and keep it inside your vest. I never really understood that. My dad used to use those when I was a kid, and it used to scare the hell out of me because I basically got a flame in my pocket. But if you like those kind, use those kind. I'm more of a nerd, so I went with the digital version. This is actually a combination battery bank that you can use to charge your devices as well as a flashlight. But you can turn this thing on, and what it does is it has heating elements inside of it that warm up, and I put this inside my vest, and it keeps me nice and toasty, but it also keeps the batteries at a reasonable temperature. When I pull them out of my jacket, stick them in the drone, I can fly a lot longer than if I just had them sort of in the case sitting on the ground. So it's something to consider. And I'll put links below where you can find all this stuff online. All right, so the other thing with the batteries is you never want to charge the batteries cold. You don't want to charge them really hot either, but that middle ground of temperature for charging them is where you want to do it. So don't go back to your car, take a battery that's drained, plug it in the middle of the winter, even if your car is warm, and charge it, because if you charge these batteries at the wrong temperature, you won't notice it immediately, but over time, you'll reduce the number of charges charge cycles the battery can actually perform. So you want to make sure that when you use the batteries, fly through 3 batteries, put them in your vest, go home, let them sit a little while. Don't bring them right back in the house and start charging them. Let them acclimate to room temperature. But once you feel them and they don't feel cold anymore, then charge them all you want. But don't charge them in the car and don't charge them as soon as you get back in the house. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, a couple of accessories you might want to consider for this if you're flying in the wintertime. Optically, the winter's a bad time to fly because you've got millions or billions of ice crystals on the ground in the form of snow and sun reflecting off those, and you get a lot of that sort of, flashing white lights through the camera when you're flying. So ND filters, especially like an ND4, ND8, or ND16, are a big help because you get that glare off the snow that can ruin a perfect shot if you're looking down and the sun's ricocheting off that snow. So you might want to consider a set of filters. I'll put some links below where you can check those out as well, but I don't use them that much in the summertime unless I'm flying over water or I've got a late afternoon sun that I have to fly towards when I'm filming something. But in the wintertime, they're almost a necessity because the raw camera itself can't handle that kind of glare off the snow really well. Having an ND filter that you snap on there, typically an ND4 or an ND8 works pretty well for me for most situations. That's the way I'd go with it. So I'll put a link down there where you can check that out. All right, what else did I want to talk about? Oh, the controller. One of the most sensitive parts of this entire enterprise is the transmitter inside the controller because you've got a Wi-Fi transmitter. You've got one in here as well, but for some reason when it's flying, it gets warm. This one doesn't get as warm and it tends to get neglected. You're focusing on the drone, keeping that dry and keeping it warm. You forget that the controller's got a transmitter in it. This transmitter gets cold, you're gonna start seeing problems. And the first thing you'll notice when a transmitter is gonna have issues is you won't lose control of the drone typically. What you'll do is you'll lose the video feed. It'll start getting choppy and maybe you'll get some errors like, loss of control. The first thing I notice, and I know I'm going to be in trouble, is when I get choppy video sent back because the first thing it's going to lose is the video. So if you start to see choppy video, pretty good chance the controller got cold on you. Take it, put it inside your vest, let it warm up a little bit before you change the battery and fly again. And that's pretty much all I had today. Now I know a lot of those seem like simple things to remember, but I love flying in the wintertime, and I know you're going to want to put your drone up as well. So hopefully 1 or 2 of these are things you haven't heard before that will help you stay safe in the wintertime because flying a drone 200 feet in the air, looking at that beautiful fresh powder that's on the ground with all the glory that's out there in the afternoon with that sun washing across that forest, man, there's nothing nicer than that. So have fun with your drone. Just be smart. Keep your flights short. Take care of your drone. When you bring it back inside, don't start charging it up or powering it up. Give it some time to breathe and acclimate back to room temperature and you're going to be just fine. So thanks an awful lot for watching. If you have any questions about anything I've covered, please drop those in the comments below and I'll be happy to get back to you. Like I said, I'll put some links below for some of the stuff I've talked about just in case you're curious about it. The other thing I did want to mention is we're just about to launch our 12 days of Drone Valley Christmas. Now, if you don't know what that is, we do that every year where I give away 12 beautiful prizes, completely free, free shipping, free everything. And we run a contest every day for 12 days in a row. All you have to do is subscribe to the channel, enter the contest. We pull a name at random and we just send you whatever it is we're giving that day, giving away that day. And it's yours to keep and you can enjoy it just because we like doing this kind of stuff and we want to give back to the community. So stay tuned to the channel. Make sure you subscribe before those 12 days of Drone Valley Christmas starts so you can enter those contests and win some really cool prizes. And that's pretty much it for today. So thanks an awful lot for watching, and until next time, happy flying.